Hey, good afternoon or good evening. Welcome to another edition of Amsterdam Talk Season 2, episode, I get lost with this, 21. 21 today. And I'm here with a special guest. I'm here with author, writer Rick Mancuso right here. How you doing today?
Good. Nice to meet you, Ron.
Nice to meet you as well. So before we get started, we want you to tell the people about yourself a little bit.
Well, I'm an author of two books, Asking for a Friend, which is about herpes, and a children's book, which is actually the first kids book about cold sores.
Okay.
And I'm also the president and founder of the Penny for Your Thoughts campaign, which is a nonprofit signature and letter petition campaign to fast track the herpes vaccine that is actually being worked on as we speak.
Okay. All right. So you say this vaccine as we speak. How effective is it? I mean, have they tried it yet?
I was in the original trial in 2016,
Okay.
and that was for the immunotherapeutic treatment, which is it's essentially this almost the same as the regular vaccine, but it's used as an immunotherapeutic. So it's actually retraining your immune system on how to fight the virus properly, just like the rest of the planet is doing just fine.
Okay. I have you on that. So you say you have this book asking for a friend, and I went over it early, and you basically just what you just said, the therapeutic and immunotherapy pro prophylactic vaccine. I think that's how you
Yeah,
pronounce
yeah. That's the best way to describe that is kind of like a preventative, like people who get the when you're a kid, you get the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine.
it.
It
Mm-hmm.
actually prevents infection. So that's the other one that they're actually working on. So it's pretty wild to think in the future where we'll have treatments for people who actually experience outbreaks and then a preventative so that people don't get herpes.
Okay. So what is there? There is some people think that it's all life end once you are diagnosed with it. So it's like if
Yeah.
you could take me through a step since you wrote the books and you did the research, like how is a person emotionally feeling when they first find out?
Oh man. Well, I'll just be straight with you. I was diagnosed when I was just turning 18. I'm 53 now.
Okay.
And I never in a million years was planning to ever talk about herpes ever in my entire life.
Right.
Um, there's a lot of people, including myself at that time, that was just suffering from the shame,
Mm-hmm.
the embarrassment. For some reason we were all taught that like, oh, herpes is bad.
Right.
So, with that narrative going around, we were all kind of like we got suckered into it.
Mm.
So I was suffering for years just with my own, stigma and the shame of experiencing that frequently.
Mm.
And I run a few Facebook groups. One has like 14,000 people in it. And I can't tell you how often I see people come in there and they are either um, frustrated, they're angry, they're upset, and
Right.
it takes a while to kind of break somebody out of that.
Okay. So they come in and they upset, like what type of like I guess we would say what type of like coddlement that we do to make that person break out of that stigma, out of that funk. Like what do you do in these groups? Like how do the groups handle those things?
Well, with a group that large, it kind of sometimes, from social media how it can kind of take off in the wrong direction.
Right.
You have, everybody has a pair of legs, everybody wants to use them.
Right.
So opinions are kind of tough. You know what I mean? So um, I kind of try to handle it in a way of a little bit of education and a little bit of understanding.
Hmm.
I try to emphasize people. I says, look, I know what you're feeling right now is not great and it's upsetting,
Right.
but I got to tell you, like herpes is everywhere. There's five
Right.
to 6 billion people walking around with herpes simplex, and most of them don't even know it, and they're doing just fine.
Right.
It's unfortunate that you're feeling this way and you have this idea what the stigma is, but once you get to a point where you don't care what people think, there is no stigma.
Got you. So, you said, 6 to 8 billion people, you even have simplex one, simplex two. Um, I'm pretty well, you have a bunch of other ones too. It's like six
Yeah.
more.
Well, there's nine. There's the old stat was 8, but there's actually 9 types of herpes. 10 if you want to get technical and count the monkey herpes virus, which is extremely super rare. I think only 15 people have ever been exposed to it. But yeah, I mean, you have herpes simplex types 1 and 2. You have chickenpox. You have Epstein's Barr, commonly
Hmm.
known as mono, CMV. You have type 6 and type 7, which almost every infant gets.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? There's so many different types of nervous system infections that herpes creates, and it's when you start looking at the sheer numbers. You know, estimates from 2012 were like close to 4 billion people with type 1, and then another 500 million plus of type 2. Well, it's now 2022, and the numbers have gone up exponentially. So it's pretty much everywhere. So I'll even tell people, I'm like, look, it's not the end of the world.
Right.
90% of people by the time they reach the age of 50 are going to have herpes simplex. The stats are they're staggering.
That's so staggering. So basically, you say everybody by that age will have it. Like we know the most common way everybody would say is through sexually transmission. I think so. Are there other ways to, you know, get the
Yes.
symptoms?
Yeah. I mean, I tell people a lot of even some friends of mine were under, even myself at the time years ago was under the assumption as soon as you hear herpes you think sex,
Right.
but
Sex.
that is not the case. That is not the case. Most people were exposed to herpes as children, believe it or
Okay.
not. So kids are always putting things in their mouth.
Right. Right. Right.
If you have little kids, they're touching stuff, they're putting things in their mouth, they're kissing other people. And then
Mm-hmm.
when you have grandparents kissing people, you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? So it just makes sense that the largest percentage of people get it from kissing hello or even sharing utensils.
Right.
You know what I mean? So sharing utensils, it's kind of a touchy subject because you'll see some people say, oh, it's impossible. And it's like, no, it's not impossible. It's just, it probably doesn't happen as often as people think. But
Right.
if somebody does have activity going on in their mouth and they're unaware of it, and it's on a blunt, it's on a cigarette, it's on a toothpick, it's on something, you're sharing something, it's very possible for it to get passed on that way. Sure.
Got you. So yeah, that was another thing I was saying, from oil, as far as like you just said, from smoking, whether it's blunts or whether it's cigarettes or any other type of tobacco that you're sharing, it can be transmitted that way. So with that being said, if it being transmitted that way, does it just well does a person, because a lot of men don't like to go to the doctor, so it's like how do they understand, like must you just get a cold sore or just a random bump, is like there's some type of symptom that decides to say, hey, this is what you may have?
Well, here's the crazy part, Ron. So we have this virus that is millions of years old, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's been around for a very long time, and it's used that time quite wisely to perfect its mode of infection. And
Right.
most people that are exposed to the virus, they
Mm-hmm.
never even see any signs. They don't even know that they've been infected.
So they're more like asymptomatic.
Very much so. Some people will experience like a little bump or a little cut, and they're like, "Oh, well, it's nothing. It must be, whatever." But it could very well be that. So the only way to determine is to actually have the bump or pimple swabbed.
Okay.
But if that's not done within the first 2 to 3 days, it'll come back negative. And the other unfortunate side effect that people don't realize is that the current blood testing method for herpes, it's 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 kind of garbage, really. It doesn't really work that well. Um, Half the time, it gives false positives and false negatives because it has this inability to find antibodies at low levels, and it has an inability to be accurate in most cases.
Mm.
So there's lots of people that actually test negative and they actually carry the virus.
So how would you say, you say it's faulty? So what would be the percentage of the fault of it being faulty? Like, if you, well,
Oh,
someone take a test, like 70-30, something like that.
but almost 50%, depending on what study you read. So almost half the time, it's giving false positives and false negatives, which is the reason why the CDC and the FDA don't recommend testing on individuals who are asymptomatic. Because, well, there's a few reasons that I don't officially agree with, but it's unfortunately it's true. You can give a diagnosis to somebody that and it could be devastating to them.
Right.
Meanwhile, they don't even know if they really have it,
Right.
or
Okay.
they do have it and they test negative and they think they're fine and they're going out into the world with no issues.
Mm, that also
So
could be
it's a few
the
things that it's a few things to think about. It really kind of sucks because we have this we have these situations going on with people, and people are going to feel a certain way, and then you have the medical community that has this testing method that's not great. So
right.
there's this huge disconnect.
Okay. So you stated that you tested positive at 18, and as 18, you're just becoming a man. So like, how did that like affect your like dating
Oh
life?
man,
Like, how did that affect it?
when I was 18,
Hmm.
I was dumb as a box of rocks, man. I didn't know anything,
Right.
just a dumb kid. And I remember specifically the doctor, and this is before I'm really telling my age here, man. Before, we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have pagers, we didn't have the internet. You had no information. And there was no way in hell I was going to take my bicycle or hop in a car and go to the library to look up herpes. There was just no way. Could you
Got
could
you.
you imagine? You know what I mean? Like, that's insane. I was never even thinking about that.
Right. Right. Right.
So the doctor, I was just like, I'm in the waiting room, and I'm like, what do you mean I have herpes? Like, what do I do? And then like the one doctor was like, don't worry about it. Everybody has it. And I was like, really?
Mm,
Just don't worry about it. And for years, being a bit of a dummy at that time, I kind of just went with it. And
mm,
then when the doctor had said, if you have any outbreaks, just don't engage in activity.
right.
And I was like, well, I guess he's the doctor. I guess he knows. But now in 2022, over the last 10 years, or even a little bit more than that, since 1981 was the internet came out, um, we do know that the risk is slightly higher than just not worrying about it.
Okay. So that's the only thing they told you to say, hey, if there's an outbreak, don't do anything. Everybody has it. And like you said, that's kind of like passing into the stone age of what we have now, where though you can just hop on your you can probably see my phone. You can just hop on your phone and Google it, and or if you want to be passe and classic and go to the library, you can still do that if you like to. So you out here, you 18, you 19, you just going around, you having fun or whatever. So women, did you just like mention it to them, or you just was like, hey, I'm not mentioning it at all? Because the doctor said everybody got it.
Yeah, most of the time, as much as it pains me to admit this, being naive,
Hmm.
and I believe it was the early 90s
Hmm.
where everybody was just having sex with one another.
Right.
I had the typical really long hair. I had the denim jacket. I was like rocker. You know what I mean? Like typical 90s big hair ridiculousness.
Okay.
And nobody was, I know I was never taught on understanding human sexuality. I was never taught that you should go and get tested.
Right.
I didn't have, honestly, I didn't have any mentors
Hmm.
or any type of an educational uh, friend at that point to say, hey, listen, why don't you stop for a second, maybe think about this, or maybe think about that, or maybe go and get tested, or maybe you shouldn't just be sleeping around. Maybe you should think a little bit more. Like there was really little guidance at that time. I had been thrown out of my house when I was said going on 17, and
Mm.
my family life was very abusive, and my parents were very abusive, and I never really learned anything. I didn't even know how to have a savings or checking account. So when I got thrown into the world, I was just a wild child, just going nuts. So I didn't have any guidance, which was unfortunate. I don't really, I see so many kids out there now, and I see some of them. I'm like, you should be glad that you have some people in your corner and you have some guidance to kind of help you, even with just some basics.
Right.
So, not that I'm making excuses for bad behavior, but the 90s were they were pretty crazy, and it was
Yeah,
stupid.
yeah, the 90s, yeah, the 90s were definitely. I don't know what's going on with my camera, but it's coming back. But so you were out in the 90s just doing what you were doing. So has anybody ever came back to you and approached you and said, "Hey, this is what I have," and
No, no, I've had a few relationships. Um, I did have a few solid relationships back in the day, and I don't really remember the specific details, but it was just something that no one ever talked about. I think the one person I was in a relationship with back in the day for somewhat of a long term, I believe she had it because she had cold sores
okay,
when we met,
mm,
and it's really a litmus test to our lack of education for
right.
STDs because nobody ever brought it up. We were never taught it in school. We were never taught anything about it, and it was just most doctors were like, "Don't worry about it."
Well, that's what one of the comments just saying across the bottom of the screen that said people don't take it serious because there's no death related to it. There's no death relations.
Well, if I may add to that, there are some death relations to that.
Okay,
You
explain
have
to us.
yeah, it's kind of rare, but it is part of the actual platform of my campaign that I talk about. Neonatal herpes is when infants are exposed to herpes and they don't really have an immune system.
Okay,
I've met 4 different women over the last year who have lost their child to herpes. But if we're being completely honest, I don't want that to spook people or scare the hell out of them because I know that that does kind of scare people. The cases of neonatal herpes are very low. We're talking about maybe 15,000 a year
mm-hmm.
in the world population, so they are low, but it is definitely something to be aware of and be concerned about. So
So
so I tell people who come into the groups, there's a lot of women who come into the groups and they have genital herpes. It's either type 1 or type 2. And they're like, "Oh, I want to have a kid. I don't know what to do." And I was like, "Well, the basic part is to not engage in activity when you're having symptoms.
right,
If you've had it for a while, you should be okay. You're not going to pass the virus in utero.
right,
And if you do give birth, your doctor number one, needs to be aware of it so they can put you on antivirals during the last trimester if you're going to give natural childbirth.
okay,
And my final piece of advice would be don't let anyone kiss your baby.
okay,
There are many cases of herpes that are passed on to infants due to people kissing babies, grandparents, or even the parents. So if you're not aware of your status, I know it's hard not to kiss your baby because
right,
it's your baby.
right, right. It's hard. Yeah, it's hard.
Right? We're human beings and we're creatures of touch, and that is how we communicate.
Right.
So, but if you are somebody who does suffer from cold sores, you may want to consider that conversation in your head.
Got you. So I'm reading right here. So I'm looking it up as you were saying it. So it says about 1 in 5,000 to 7,000 live births.
Yep.
Um, During the first year of life, these infants usually develop the antibodies against it. So, like you just said, don't do all the kissing and touching because the first year they'll get the antibodies, to fight it off. Uh, what else? I just seen something else. It was
Well,
saying,
the
go ahead.
antibody the antibody discussion is actually quite interesting. Antibodies are reactive. You have your innate and adaptive immune system. So your adaptive immune system is the one that makes T cells and B cells and protects you. Antibodies don't create protection against herpes because herpes actually makes its way into your nervous system and lives there. So
Mm,
what the antibodies will actually do at that point is that when you experience an outbreak or the virus comes out, your antibodies will react. It will, let's say you get a cold sore on your mouth. Your
right.
antibodies, your immune system reacts. The antibodies will go in, they'll attack the virus, kill it, and remove it. What it doesn't kill is where the virus is hiding.
Okay.
So antibodies are good. You want that. But your immune system. Herpes simplex is kind of like an unwanted roommate that lives in
Okay,
your body, and your immune system is keeping it in its room, and the virus is constantly looking out the door trying to come out.
got you. So let's say basically about the child, the infant, small skin blisters,
Mhm.
small skin blisters. This can happen 2 to 12 days after HSV exposure.
In infants, they don't really have an immune system that's really working very well, so they're very reactive to herpes if they are exposed.
Okay. Okay. So, so now we go back. We talked about a child, so we now back into the adult stage, So how often can these symptoms, outbreaks and symptoms happen?
Well, here's the really interesting part. So we have 5 to 6 billion people who carry the
Hmm.
virus, and probably less than 1 billion of those actually experience symptoms. So the biggest number, the largest percentage of that, they get maybe a cold sore once a year, maybe once every few years. You get down to the number of 500 million people, and now you're talking an average around people who are experiencing more frequent symptoms, like maybe once a month. And then when you get even lower, now you have people that are experiencing extreme symptoms. So it's the same virus, two very different experiences.
Okay. So as of right there, so once a person gets the outbreak, should they start acquiring about taking their medicine, or should they already be taking their medicines?
There's two schools of thought on that, because antivirals, even though they do work for some people, they do have side effects. One of the side effects that people don't know about, and even most doctors don't know about, is that if you take antivirals for longer than 6 months, you can actually deplete some of your natural immunity. You will lose some antibody response. So people who all of a sudden just start taking pills, it's very possible that within 6 months, when they stop taking the medication, they start experiencing more frequent symptoms, when in fact they could have given their body time to adjust to the virus and learn how to fight it. And then, of course, the other school of thought would be from a few other people saying that they don't want to wait, they don't want to experience that, they're just going to take the pills.
Okay. So would common triggers for like reoccurrence be like just basically getting sick, stress, sunlight, fatigue?
Yeah, I mean, herpes is a immunotolerant issue. So if you
Okay.
have a really good immune system and you're pretty healthy, and you don't have an autoimmune issue, you're not immunocompromised, and you're doing really well, you'll probably never see any symptoms.
Okay.
But in people who do have an autoimmune issue, they have diabetes, they have lupus, they have MS, they could have a number of different things. These people will sometimes experience more symptoms than others. So the triggers are kind of like, for them, peanut butter, chocolate, coffee, cigarettes,
Okay.
uh, vaping, anything with a high content of arginine. Arginine is an amino acid that's found in a lot of different foods.
Okay.
Um, that Peanut butter, chocolate, they have a very high content of arginine. Workout shakes, the workout powder,
Hmm.
has a high content of arginine. And what these people end up doing is that they end up doing creating a balance. They have lysine is a natural amino acid that actually impedes the virus's ability to reproduce. So in people who are experiencing these triggers, they tend to take foods higher in lysine than arginine. And when they lower their balance, they stop experiencing symptoms. For the most part, there's still going to be some issues, but sunlight is a trigger. I know I've been really good lately because of the vaccine, but if I go out in the sun and I don't put sunscreen on and I'm out there for a few hours, I'm probably going to get an outbreak.
Mm. So the COVID vaccine didn't give you outbreak that you just said?
No, no. The COVID vaccine was non-reactive to me. I didn't experience
Okay.
any symptoms, which is odd because there are a lot of people that are experiencing herpes for the first time. And that is
Hmm.
because their immune system is busy learning this new antigen. And if your immune system is busy doing something, the herpes virus tends to, oh, you're busy. Okay, I'm going to come out now.
Right. Got you. So I do see a lot of women on here today. And what about the menstrual period, menstrual cycles?
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, it's it sucks so bad for women. Women tend to suffer more than men for the physiological reasons. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the vagina and the vulva offer more mucosal membrane surface area. Women are more susceptible to bacteria and viruses just because of how they're built.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the menstrual cycle, when that cycle engages, it will the immune system kind of impedes itself because during pregnancy, if a woman is
Mm-hmm.
trying to get pregnant, you don't want a hyperactive immune system because it'll just kill the sperm off and she'll never become pregnant. So there's this balance that's going on within the pH level and the vagina, which is allowing the sperm to survive. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So during this menstrual cycle, and the hormones can actually the immune system becomes suppressed, which allows the virus to emerge. So there are a lot of women who do end up suffering from frequent symptoms, which also coincide with bacterial vaginosis as well.
Okay. All right. So, what are some of the do's and don'ts?
Well, I think obviously the don'ts are, if you are experiencing symptoms, tingling sensations or sharp pains, don't engage in activity.
Okay.
Stay away if you can. I highly suggest. It's just a suggestion. You can't sit here and tell people what to do. That'd be silly.
Right.
But if you're a woman and you're experiencing symptoms, you may have to wait 7 days. You may have to wait a few weeks. You know, because you could be shedding viral material at that time. Because some women will experience prodrome, which is the tingling sensation and sharp pains, but there's no actual outbreak taking place. And unfortunately for the ladies, they may experience pain and outbreaks internally, so they don't even know that
Mm-hmm.
they're actually experiencing an outbreak.
Okay.
But the dues, you know, it's good to get tested. You know, uh, it's good to do. Yeah, somebody just said disclosure. Absolutely, disclosure allows for consent. It allows for trust. So if you go and get tested, ask for a 10-panel test, and keep in mind that the herpes test may or may not be accurate. I wrote a whole entire article on it. It's free. You can find it on my articles. Um, if you get your test back and it says 2.0, which shows as positive, however, it's under 3.5. I was just discussing this with Dr. Ina on a live we did not too long ago. Anything under 3.5 in that range of 1.10 to that number in the
Mm-hmm.
middle could very well be a false positive. But if
Okay.
you test over 3.5, if you get your test back and it comes back, 18.0 or 5.0, that's a definitive positive. So there are some ways you can get tested to see if you have any results. If you keep getting tested and you keep getting the same numbers, more than likely you do have it. But again, it's not written in stone. However, getting tested for STDs is always a good thing because gonorrhea, syphilis, these are
Right.
all STDs that are on the rise, and you can have them and not even know it. So that would
Right.
definitely be a do. And if you do have herpes, just tell your partner, say, hey, listen, I get cold sores once in a while. Have you been tested? Sometimes people who have herpes are more worried about their own thing without even asking their new partner, have you been tested?
Right.
It's an equal playing field.
Got you. So, so we brought you here. You're the author of, Ask for a Friend, the kids' book. So, what are some of the biggest misconceptions that you've heard that you had to correct people with?
Oh my God. Well, number one, people hear herpes, they automatically think sex. That's
Right.
that's not that's not the case. Um, some people will say, oh, cold sores aren't herpes. It's like, no, well, yeah, they are. They really
Mm-hmm.
are. Or the fact that people either don't know or they're just ignorant, like, oh, well, I have a cold sore, but I don't care. I kiss everybody.
Mm,
That's it's kind of not cool. I mean, if you're kissing somebody who already has it, okay, I get it. But if you're just walking around kissing people and just you're kind of sort of part of the problem, you know.
yeah, that's
And
not good.
it's kind of unfair, if you meet somebody and you really like them, do you really not want to let them know about certain things about you? if I had a major ailment, or what if I had multiple sclerosis and I married somebody who didn't tell her, and then all of a sudden I came down with MS? That would be really unfair.
Well, I think you should tell people off, from the beginning, because it's just being honest about it, and let them put the ball in their court and let them decide what they want to
Yep.
do.
And here's the
Some
thing about dating too. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
go ahead. You can go ahead.
For when it comes to like dating, a lot of
Hmm.
people will say, "Oh, well, I disclose right away." And my big thing with that is that I don't think that you should disclose right away. But here's the caveat. I'm not saying you engage in activity with them or have sex with them. I'm saying you wait. Because the
Okay.
one thing that we tend to forget about, maybe not you, but I know we as a general term and people, myself and other people, that we tend to forget that when you first meet somebody, they don't know anything about you. You haven't
Right.
established your value as a human being.
Right.
Like if I walked past you on the street, I would just be like, "Oh, it's just another dude." But
Hmm.
unless I had a conversation with you and you talked to this person and you had some rapport with them and you got to know them, you're like, okay, now you know this person, you kind of establish this sort of value.
Right.
You know what I mean? So if you're dating somebody and you're not showing them good reasons why this person should be with you, you're not showing any value. And if the first thing you blurt out is, "Hi, my name is Rich. I have herpes," you kind of really set yourself off on a bad. But
Right.
you're dumping your purse all over the counter for everyone to see all your garbage inside.
Right.
And I don't mean to call it garbage, but you're just dumping TMI out too soon.
Right.
Get
Right. Right.
let somebody get to know you first. Like, oh, wow, that person's not that bad. Like, I really like this person. I really like this guy. I really like this girl. They got herpes, but you know what? Maybe the good things outweigh that.
It could be. I mean, well, that could be, because the fact is, like you said, don't just disclose everything, because once a person get to know you, especially if you're not taking it there anyway, and once you decide to take it there, and then you disclose that information to them,
Sure.
and maybe you could sit down and, well, you have Herpes 101 podcast, and the Herpes 101 podcast right here by Rich. You maybe can sit down or get some type of information. Not we're not gonna Google nothing. We're not gonna Google nothing, because you end up with anything from their Wikipedia doctor. so
Oh my God, it's the worst. So much bad information out there. I
so
I literally wrote an entire article with no extra links, and it's called "To Whom It May Concern," and it's literally a disclosure letter to
okay,
the person you send it to. It could be used, and it's free. It's totally free. People steal it all the time. It's totally fine. I wrote it specifically for that reason. And it's literally like you're dating somebody and you're on the third date and you're like, "Wow, I really like you. Hey, I want to send you something and see what you think." And these people have used this. They've been using it for years now. They send a link to the person and the person reads the link and they're like, "Oh, wow." And I wrote it in a way to where it's a more kinder, gentler way of introducing this information to somebody who may not know anything about it.
right, right. So there was a question came up to say, well, how do you have safe sex?
There's really no such thing as safe sex anymore. Everybody pretty much has HPV. And whether you wear a condom or not, you're going to get it. Condoms only prevent herpes about 30%.
Okay.
That's about it. And don't forget, no joke here intended, the condom only covers a small area, depending on who you are. But really, it's if you look at your entire body, the only thing it's covering is that. That's it. That's all it's
Right.
covering.
Yeah, and
So
you was great. I mean, I was going to say, of course, HPV is definitely on the rise. That is a big thing, as we speak right now.
I,
Um,
I I tell so many women and even men, if you are of age, get the shot for HPV. Somebody very close to me, uh, I'm not going to say names or anything, but
no, don't know.
somebody
I can do
someone
that.
very someone very close to me, she just turned 18 and she got a rip roaring case of HPV, and she's assuming it's from her boyfriend. They're still together. He had no idea. it's an unknown transmissible thing that people are going through. It's not even his fault. He didn't even know. However, the parents should have gotten these kids vaccinated when they were 14, and now she's has to worry about cancer.
So you can actually, that's the age, legal age for it, 14, to receive that vaccine.
They're changing it down to 12
Okay.
because you don't have to have sex to get HPV. There's over 100. There's a few hundred different strains of HPV, and a few of them actually do cause major issues for some. Most of HPV people's bodies clear them on their own, but some of them not so much. So they're recommending between the ages of like 11 to 50. But I'm hoping that the FDA and the CDC are going to change that to allow everybody to get it, because even if you did have one specific type, the vaccine will protect against others.
Okay. Okay.
So
So I want to go back to the beginning where we started talking about the actual current vaccine.
mhm.
So it's not FDA approved, but you said you were in the testing in 2016.
I was in the original offshore trial. It was done
Okay.
overseas,
Okay.
so it wasn't FDA regulated.
Okay.
Um, I knew what I was getting into. Dr. Halford, who invented the vaccine,
Hmm.
had been working on this for 20 something years.
Okay.
He had, I don't know if anybody listening likes to read scientific data. I don't think anybody really does, but he had the data, uh, and he proved pretty much that it worked. So I was more than willing to become a guinea pig, and myself and 17 other people. As a matter of fact, there's a few people in the study that are still in remission and still have not experienced any symptoms, which is pretty remarkable.
Mm.
The CEO of the company, Dr. Halford, died a few years back, and then the new company, Rational Vaccines, was formed. The CEO, who is a friend of mine, Augustine, he actually has type 1,
Okay.
and he has not experienced any symptoms either, which is pretty remarkable. I got 3 shots,
Mm.
April of 2016, May and June, and then I saw an immediate decline. I didn't see an immediate reaction like some of the people in the study did.
Right.
I was tending to suffer from 2 to 3 outbreaks a month for a very long time, for like over 28 years,
Mm.
and I started seeing a reduction in symptoms. So
Okay.
instead of like 2 to 3, I was getting 1 here, 2 here, and then all of a sudden it completely dropped off, and I didn't get any symptoms for almost a little over in a year, like 15 months.
Mm-hmm.
Then I experienced maybe 1 or 2 outbreaks, and then I was clear again for another year, which was insane, which had never happened to me before.
Mm.
So once that started happening, I decided to write the book, and I started talking about it. I made a promise to Dr. Halford before he died, and I said, if this works, I promise I'll talk about it. And he was like, yeah, whatever. Everybody says that, and I was just like, even my ego was like, what are you doing? Don't do that.
Right.
But it worked. It worked, and I felt really stupid. I felt really stupid to be that guy to not talk about it. Could you
Right.
imagine being somebody who suffers not knowing anything about this because I didn't want to talk about it?
Right. So what's the hold up right now between now and today? Like, why hasn't the FDA approved it yet?
They're starting new trials.
Okay.
So because the new company formed, they had to redo everything, which is unfortunate. And then COVID happened, so we lost like 5 years,
Mm.
right? So they redid all of the animal studies. They redid all of the prophylactic and um, immunotherapeutic studies, which are readily available, peer-reviewed studies, and they pretty much proved again the second time that it works. So
Okay.
now they have to go through the proper channels. They're going to be starting the immunotherapeutic trial in London, in the UK,
Okay.
in the beginning of this year, hopefully very soon in the next few months. And the nice thing about the UK trial is because the UK runs a different type of system. They are um, they're not like the FDA. The FDA, to get any drug or any vaccine passed, is that it takes 5 to 10 years, which is
Okay.
insane. That's insane. We had COVID got approved because it was fast tracked. So
Right.
why can't we fast track this? So I started the campaign to have people sign the petitions.
Mm-hmm.
And then once we get enough signatures, I send that right directly to Peter Marks over at the FDA.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully we can get that fast tracked in the United States so people don't have to go to England to get the shot.
Well,
But the
that was
nice,
my next question. Was like, why overseas and not here on our home ground?
right, exactly. Why can't we have this here? It's so
Right.
insane.
Right.
So I started the campaign years ago, and I knew that this was going to be a thing because I knew it was going to take some time because science takes forever. So the petition right now is at 23,000 signatures, which is pretty good. Hoping for more. Maybe some of your, even if you don't have herpes, you're actually helping other people just by signing.
Right. So I have you right here, and you said there was 17 other people, and they're in remission.
I would say, if I remember correctly, at least 5 that I know of are still in remission. And they don't really want to talk about it publicly. One of my friends on there, she's thinking about going public and talking about it. So fingers crossed.
Right.
I want her to talk about it in a really bad way because I've been doing this out here by myself for 5 years. Because
Mm.
you have the same face as everybody else. They're like, well, you're talking about it. Where's all the trial participants? Why aren't they talking about it?
Well, I get it. Some people don't want to be in front of the cameras and don't want to talk about it. So I get
Yeah,
that, you know.
yeah,
I mean, it's even with some people that come on here and talk to me about certain things. They want blackface. They like, I don't want to be seen. I'll talk, but I don't want to be seen. So
right.
I kind of get that. So,
Well, I got a lot of grief when I first came out, started talking about it. People were just brutal. Oh, oh my God.
but why would they be brutal if this is something that can help people? I mean, I get because you want to talk about it, but you going through these trials and you're going through remission, and you say 6 billion people. Somebody has to say something. Say, hey, we could do this.
Isn't that amazing? So you look at the percentage of people that probably have it and are walking around with it. Oh, thank you
Mhm.
for posting the link. You see all of these people in these numbers, and you're like, the petition only has 23,000 signatures. And I always make the joke, and I'm like, you know what? It's not, it's a dark joke, but it's like, if somebody was out in the street and they caught somebody on camera kicking a puppy, this petition would have 300,000 signatures on it to catch that guy.
Right.
But with something that could medically help people, it's amazing that word herpes holds that such a stigma against it that it's so hard to even get people to sign a petition.
Which is true. I mean, it's just certain groups have certain powers, magic
Yeah,
powers that get the ball rolling.
yeah,
Um, but like one of the viewers said, about the mortality being so low, maybe they just saying, hey, we don't, is really not mortality. And I learned something through you with neonatal. So, I'm thinking like there's really no depth to this, but you just put me hip to there's between 5,000 to 7,000 children, toddlers, babe, infants that die every year due to this.
yeah.
So that's something new to me. So for me to go to someone and say, if I was, that interact with somebody and they was to say, nobody's died from this, I would say, well, on my podcast, I have, a guy on there, he spoke about it and he's, real and informative about it with 2 books. 5 to 7,000 babies a year die of this.
Yeah. The other
So
thing too, people, you make a lot of good points. I think one of the biggest reasons why nothing happens, or very little happens, I should say, is because of one word: silence.
silence.
Silence is the catalyst for the stigma. It feeds it constantly. And it's the shame that creates the silence. And you look at the FDA, right? So
Right,
there's a lot of things that go on there that I'm not happy about, but there's still people that work there. People like
right,
you and I. They want to do a good job. They want to help people. That's all they want to do. You have all this regulation BS that's going on, which is the problem. But
right.
if you have an ailment or you have a disease that no one is talking about, there must not be a problem. So you look at HIV. It wasn't until people really started talking about it and pushing it and seeing that this was happening. Yes, it was causing death, which is a very good catalyst for that.
Right.
But if people aren't talking about something, then silence is the enemy.
Yes. I mean, like you said, the stick silence and the stigma, and some people say, I don't want to speak because I may be shameful. Like people may say, back, back, back. You don't know that's not that, but
Yeah.
you got to speak, and that's what it's about. You have to inform people. It's like that sign I used to see as a kid. Teach your kids virgin is not a dirty word. Like, okay, it's not a dirty word, but it'll get you joked upon once you reach a certain age. So,
Yeah. Well,
it,
it's a shame there's such this archaic view of human sexuality.
right,
If you want to read something that's really interesting, I'm putting it in the second edition of my book. It was a study that was done. It was called the Madonna whore dichotomy, and it
okay,
does this huge. You would I think you would really enjoy this. It does this huge in-depth look of the difference in that view of between virgin and whore,
okay,
and it really pulls apart this archaic view of this judgment that is placed upon even just virginity or even just sex,
right,
because the double standard. If you're a guy, you're a stud if you're siring all these women, but if you're a
right,
woman, ooh, you're a slut or you're a whore, which is
right,
absurd. That's
right.
absurd.
But that was back then. Now it's like it's role reversal now. Like it's like women are now like taking on that role of men, whereas though they become the hunters and the predators now. I mean, and I'm not even being funny, but you go out to these lounges, you go out to these bars, these clubs, and where men used to go out be predatory and say, "Hey, I'm taking somebody back home." Now it's women coming up to you and saying, "Hey, I'm taking you home with me," and it's like roles have changed. Whereas
Yeah.
though some men, they say, "Okay, it was a one night stand, man. I can call you back." Now you got some men looking for the women to say, "Hold on, why didn't you call me after this?" Roles have changed out here.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of changes going on. It's women have the uncanny. Women are better at this than men are. Maybe not you, because you're very free in talking about it, and you sound very educated. Women have this uncanny ability to capture the commitment of something, and if they hold on to something and they grab it, they freaking run with it. There's
Mm-hmm.
no stopping them. There's no stopping them. You take it's unfortunate too, because you're talking about like other movements like Me Too, Time's Up, all of these movements that are taking place because women are getting to a point where they're getting fed up and they're getting tired
Right.
of certain things. Yeah, exactly. They're taking back their sexuality,
Right.
and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. There's a lot of men who are kind of like, oh well, I don't want to ask women out anymore because I'm going to get accused of sexual harassment. I'm like, well, maybe it's what you're doing as to why you're getting accused
Right.
of sexual harassment. Maybe it's your behavior. Maybe you should look at that first and not worry about approaching women and talking to them. But you also got to read body language as well. And I think
Right.
women need to start doing that too, because if you walk up to a guy and he's not interested, you got to kind of walk away. And the same thing goes for guys. I know I met actually just the other day. I met somebody in the supermarket, and I was chatting with her, and I
Mm-hmm.
could tell by her body language that she was kind of like a little off put. And I
Right.
literally said to her, I says, "Okay," I says, forgive me, but I'm picking up some body language here, and I don't think you're comfortable with me talking to you right now. So thank you for being nice, but I promise I will walk away." And she stopped, and she was like, "Oh, okay." I says, "Am I right? Or was I?" She's like, "No, I'm just kind of like, I just got out of something." But I'm like, "Totally cool. I promise I will leave you alone." And she was totally fine.
Right.
We have to kind of, guys, we got to kind of take it to a different level now. It's okay to get rejected for
Yeah.
every
Right.
four.
You have to listen. You have to understand when to stop. Like you just said, the body language, the vibe, the tone, all of that. Gives you presents itself a like. Well, maybe I should just shut the fuck up right now. Like maybe I should just go away or just take. Like you just said. I'm done talking.
Yep.
I feel it. That's how you do not get into that situation.
No,
You
you just be a man. Don't get mace in the face and walk away and say thank you.
I mean, I guess for every 15 no's, there's going to be somebody's going to say yes eventually.
Yep.
So you have to look at that. But I was looking at your your tickle life, and you talked about a little about lysine. Can you
Yeah.
explain that?
So lysine is the natural amino acid that we were talking about before, and you can buy it in supplements, or you can you can search for foods that are high in that. So
Okay.
just like antivirals interrupt the virus's ability to reproduce. They don't stop infection. And the
Okay.
same thing goes for lysine. Lysine is a natural inhibitor of the virus. They've actually done quite a few studies on it. If you go to my articles, I've written an article called "A Little About Lysine." It's very thorough, and
Okay.
I note the 3 studies, and all the references, scientific references, are there as well. So when people take lysine in higher doses, it actually can reduce the virus's ability to reproduce. So you can actually do it in a natural way. There are some herbs and there are some supplements that you can take that may help, but
Mhm.
unfortunately, there's a lot of when we talked about do's and don'ts. I tell people one of the don'ts is don't just go to the supermarket, buy a bunch of stuff, and start ingesting it like crazy. Do your due diligence, look up the side effects, because there's a lot of stuff that you can buy over the counter that you shouldn't be putting in your body.
Yeah, because you have this thing right here about herpes and the myth of detoxing.
Yes. There's this Dr. Sebi and all this other nonsense. Sebi was never a doctor, he was an engineer.
Okay.
And he started making all of these herbs and these concoctions and claiming that he cured people. He never cured anybody. He had a court order against him from the FDA and a whole bunch of other stuff. And people make these erroneous claims that he brought a bunch of people there that he cured. You look at the court documents, there was no people there. So
Gotcha.
there's a lot
Gotcha.
of scams. There's a lot of anytime somebody comes at you and says, I can cure your herpes by taking these pills, run away.
Gotcha.
Please don't waste your money. But there are some supplements that you can take that may help alleviate symptoms. Absolutely. But there's nothing that's going to do that. There was a young lady on TikTok,
Okay.
and we were going back and forth, and she was giving people really bad information. She was telling them, if I take this black seed oil, I went and got tested and I tested negative. And I was like, that's not how that works. I'm sorry, my dear. That is not how any of this works. That is not science. Just because you're taking black seed oil and your antibody levels dropped a little bit,
Hmm.
you still have herpes. And again, remember, we talked about the test itself. It's not really that great. Yeah, somebody just, the Black Marvel just said that Dr. Sebi's claim he had a remedy. Dr. Sebi made the claim that he had a cure,
Okay.
but that's false. Now, can you take things that are alkaline and eat alkaline foods to make yourself a little bit better? Sure, absolutely. You're not going to change your alkalinity or pH level of your body. It's impossible to do that. Your blood pH stays the same. If you were able to change it that drastically by eating food, people would be dropping dead. That's not how our digestive systems work.
Gotcha.
So you can eat all the alkaline food that you want, and you will feel better. Absolutely. They've already, if you look at the foods you're supposed to eat, a lot of them are alkaline, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you're not going to literally change your pH level in your body by eating certain foods.
Got you. Definitely got you about that. But it was great having you on because it's almost that time. But this is my time. This is show right now. So we're gonna come back to you in a second. So this is one thing that I do that I run every week. It's called I Be Damn, whereas though people go out on these bad dates and they text me these stories or email me these stories, and I just retell them on here, and then you just break it down of what you heard and like how would you would have went about it. So, ladies
Sure.
and gentlemen, this week's I hold up. This week's I Be Damn. Here we go. Let's roll it. Let's roll it, brother. For real. I be damn. Good evening. I don't even know why I'm trying to make it sound like Masterpiece Theater when I come on with this, but good evening. Welcome to another edition of I Be Damn presented by Amsterdam Talk. So this kind of gets a little weird right here. This story right here. This is in Chicago. So she says, "Hey Rod, this what happened. So I met this guy a few days prior,
He asked me to meet him at this bar for happy hour. We ate, we drank, and we were quite merry, enjoying each other's company. I learned that it was his birthday, so I told some of the restaurant staff to sing happy birthday, which they did. Am I the only one who thinks it's kind of odd that our first date was on his birthday? I really don't have a clue to that, but to continue with the story. Anyway, the check came, and he immediately paid the tab. Was I supposed to pay for everything? I mean, it was his birthday and all. But then he asked me out again, so I'm not sure. My bad, dude. You grabbed the bill too fast. We walked outside and prepared to say our goodbyes, our au revoirs. Then he leaned in for a kiss, and I obliged. I mean, I did find him very attractive, and besides, it was his birthday, so how could I say no? Especially since he picked up the tab. His lips were very soft, so I was enjoying the moment until I felt his hands getting a little too personal. So I pulled away from him and removed his hands. We just met. We can't do that yet. I was trying to end the date, but he felt the need to spark up a new conversation. And what was that conversation about? Sex, of course. As we were standing in the parking lot, he began discussing how kissing was very personal to him, more personal than sex. And it would be okay for us to have sex because we wouldn't have to take it personally. Sorry, what? Bitch, please. I'ma pass on that. His bullshit sex talk was my cue to go home. As I was bidding this dude farewell, he hopped in his car and said, I'm coming with you. I gave the blankest stares and started my journey home. However, I noticed quickly that the car behind me was following me. Who was it? Mr. Let's Have Impersonal Sex. You have to be fucking kidding me. What the fuck are you doing, bro? This dude was actually following me and I couldn't believe it. My anger and disgust clouded my judgment because I should have called the police. Instead, I sped off, made an abrupt turn, drove like a bat out of hell into the neighborhood, losing him for good. Who tries to follow home their date uninvited though? That's weird. Fuck you and your birthday. I'll be damned. See you next week. Peace.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So that happened in Chicago, Illinois.
Wow. You know, geez, it sounded like it was going really well until he went to say goodbye.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, I've some people don't care about birthdays, and it is kind of a little off. But if he was behaving himself and there was no red flags at that time, then all right, that's cool. But the one thing she said, she's like, "Well, it was his birthday, and I couldn't say no." And I was like, "No, you can say no.
right,
You have that right to say no." It's kind of we're kind of stuck in this thing where like oh, you have to be nice and you have to do this. Oh, it's someone's birthday, and it's like, well, you just met the guy. Who cares if
right,
it's his birthday? you know
right.
if you're not comfortable with something, yeah, he wanted a birthday present, all right. Which is fine. If you're gonna you just kind of ask at that point, you know what I mean? Listen, I know
Right,
plenty of people that go on dates and they hook up right away and it's
right,
consensual. That's cool, there's nothing wrong with that.
right.
But if somebody says no, okay, now you're talking a whole different situation. And then he followed her home.
Right,
Wow, that's rapey, man. Jeez,
right,
the poor girl must have been scared out of her fucking mind.
right.
Jeez,
As I'm
wow.
getting the story and I'm reading, I'm like, he following you home. Like, okay.
Yeah. I'm curious. Not that this changes the story, but I am curious about the age of the couple. But either way, that doesn't change the facts of what happened.
No, yeah, it doesn't. That's one thing they didn't present me with the age. They normally just tell me I keep the name disclosed. All I do
Yeah.
is tell you where it happened at. That's
I
all.
could see I could see somebody 18 doing that, being stupid, sure. But
Right,
I have a bad feeling this is someone who's probably much older and really kind of screwed up.
right, right. Like she's, she said no, and then you just told her, "I'm coming with you."
What was
Oh,
who? I can't remember that. Bill Burr. Bill Burr does this comedy skit, and he talks about the word no, and he's like, listen, when a woman says no, no, that means no. If a
right,
woman says no, that means no. No, I don't want to do that. No. And then he goes off and he goes, well, there's a different kind of no. There's like, no, stop, don't do
right,
that. Guys need to be able to read the room.
right,
And if you're doing that kind of thing and she grabs your hand and she slaps you, that means no.
right. So
That's not a yeah, it's unfortunate.
could have caught
Wow.
a couple hot ones. I mean, hey,
Yep.
hey, you followed me, so basically you threatened my life. So I didn't know
That
what you were capable of.
dude, that's a whole different scenario. I mean, I've had a few women do that to me, which ended up being a stalker situation, but that in any situation, male or female, is messed up. That's a line that you just crossed. Now you're following somebody?
So how'd you handle that when they were stalking you?
That was very strange. That was a very strange there was a very strange situation because I have no problem with aggressive women,
Right.
but we went on a date and she was a you could tell when you speak to somebody that they're I don't want to say off, but she was different
Mm-hmm. Okay.
by her mannerisms, by the way she was speaking, and it was she was very insistent that we go back to her place. And I'm like, look, I didn't really honestly, I don't want to sound mean, but I didn't find her attractive.
That's
And
your that's
and
you have the right to say that.
yeah, she wasn't really my cup of tea.
Okay.
She wasn't for me. And I'm like, and I was trying to be nice. And
Mm,
I'm like, look, I'm just not feeling it. You seem kind of cool. You seem kind of nice. Oh, what does that mean? Blah blah blah. And then it got really really weird with the way she was carrying on. Even the waitress was looking over. I'm looking at the waitress. I'm like, can you pretend to be my girlfriend to get me out of this? This is crazy. And I was leaving, and she was
mm,
following me to my car.
mm.
I'm like, look, I gotta go. She's like, no, 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 you gotta go with me. And I'm like, no, 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 no. And then I would say about maybe 2 days later, a car had driven by in front of my house,
Mm.
and it looked like the car. And that really fucking freaked me out, man.
Mm.
But I did have another stalker situation where I did actually meet somebody and we were kind of sort of dating for a little bit, and
Okay.
then it wasn't working out. And she literally came to my house, and I was like, look, I'm not home, but if you're at my house, we're done. That's not cool. You can't just show up to my house. You've never been to my house. How do you know where I live?
Right.
And I literally went to the police station and almost got ready to get a restraining order, but then she never came back.
Yeah, that definitely sounds serious that you did the right thing. That she never been to your house. She found out where you lived at. Nah, that's not gonna fly.
Wow. Wow.
Right, that's not gonna fly. But I want to say thank you for coming on and sharing, sharing your information with us. So Rick Mac, I'm gonna mess your name, last name
Rich
up.
Rich Mancuso.
Rich Mancuso. Um,
Yep.
you can post it up the link one more time. He has two
Yes.
books out, Asking for a Friend, and the what's the name of the children's book?
This is Asking for a Friend.
Okay,
And then I have my children's book. It's actually called Never Eat Ice Cream Off the Sidewalk.
got you.
It's it's a funny kind of the little brother and the sister fight all the time. The little girl wakes up with a cold sore. She doesn't know what to do, and they go to the doctor, and it turns into this whole thing. But it's educational and it has some jokes in it. But yeah, if you go to my link, it's in the comments, my link tree. And please, if you can, even if you don't have herpes, please go to the pennyforyourthoughtscampaign.com link and sign the petitions.
Right. So remember, we heard it here first. Vaccination coming. UK, hopefully get it in the United States. So please sign the petition, even if you don't, as he said, because we can save a life, or especially neonatal lives. The one
Yes.
to 7,000 people children that die every year due to this. So thank you for coming. Anytime
you.
you'd like to come back, you can
Sure.
always come back.
Yeah, this is great. This is fun. I never know what I'm going to get when I do these with people I have never met before.
Oh man, this is, like I said, people get shocked when they get to that last 5 minutes. They're like, well, what is this I be damn thing? And it's like, you're gonna see in a second.
I really like that. That's a great ending. I love it.
Oh man. But next week I will see y'all same time next week, February 2nd, with the mother of the Matrix. So we'll see you with the mother of the Matrix next week. I forgot her name. But I got it in my phone. Mother of the Matrix next week, February 2nd. Thank y'all. This has been another episode of Amsterdam Talk for myself, Rich. Please make sure you go to the website, sign a petition. See you next week.
Thanks, guys.
All right.